My ex abandoned our daughter and left without a trace. Her return 15 years later revealed her true colors. I never thought I'd be writing this, but life has a way of throwing surprises at you when you least expect them. I'm 38 now, and my story starts when I was 23, working at a small accounting firm. That's where I met her, my first love. We connected instantly during a company event, and within months, we were living together in a tiny apartment on the outskirts of town. We were young and in love, making it work despite our tight budget. I was putting in extra hours trying to climb the corporate ladder, while she worked at a local diner. We didn't have much, but we had each other, and that seemed enough. Marriage wasn't on our minds. We thought we had all the time in the world to figure things out. Then came the news that changed everything. She was pregnant. We were scared but excited. Neither of us had planned for this, but we decided to embrace it. The day our daughter was born was both amazing and terrifying. The delivery was difficult, lasting almost 16 hours, and I could see how much it affected my girlfriend. After our daughter's birth, things started changing. My girlfriend became different, distant, and angry. She would spend hours just sitting quietly, and when she did talk, it was usually to criticize me. I tried to understand, thinking it was just the stress of being a new parent. I was working harder than ever, taking care of our daughter, and trying to support her, but nothing seemed good enough. One day, after a particularly long day at work, I came home to find our daughter crying alone in her crib. My girlfriend was gone. All her things were missing, and there was no note, no explanation, nothing. I called everyone I could think of, her family, her friends, our mutual contacts, but no one knew anything. Or if they did, they weren't telling me. Becoming a single father overnight was the hardest thing I've ever done. In the beginning, I was completely lost. I had no idea how to balance work and caring for an infant alone. Thank goodness for my parents and my older sister. They stepped in to help whenever they could. Slowly, I figured out how to make it work. I had to. There was no other choice. Those first few months were a blur of sleepless nights, rushed mornings, and constant worry. My boss was understanding and let me work flexible hours, which helped a lot. My sister would watch my daughter when I had important meetings, and my mom would come over on weekends to help with laundry and cooking. Even with all their help, there were times I felt like I was drowning. I remember one night particularly well. My daughter was running a fever, and I had no idea what to do. I called my mom in tears, convinced I was failing as a parent. She came over at midnight and stayed with us until morning. That night taught me that it was okay to ask for help, that being a good parent didn't mean having all the answers. As my daughter grew up, I made sure she had a good life. She was a happy kid, smart, and full of energy. When she asked about her mother, I kept things simple and honest, without going into the painful details. I focused on giving her the best life I could. We developed our own little traditions: Saturday morning pancakes, Sunday afternoon park visits, and bedtime stories every night without fail. My daughter's first day of school was another milestone that hit hard. Watching all the other kids with both parents made my heart ache for her. But she was resilient, making friends easily and throwing herself into every activity she could find. She joined the swim team in elementary school, and I never missed a meet. Between work, her activities, and household responsibilities, my days were packed, but I wouldn't have had it any other way. For years, it was just the two of us. Dating wasn't really on my mind. I was too busy with work and being a dad. A few friends tried to set me up, but my heart wasn't in it. My daughter was my priority, and I was content with that. But when she turned 11, something unexpected happened. At my friend Alex's birthday party, I met someone who would change our lives. She was Alex's cousin, visiting from another state. She was different from anyone I'd ever known, patient, understanding, and genuinely interested in getting to know my daughter. We started as friends, texting occasionally and meeting at family gatherings. Over time, our relationship grew naturally. She never pushed to be more than my daughter was comfortable with, and that meant everything to me. Before I knew it, 3 years had passed. Life was good. My career had taken off. I'd been promoted to senior manager at work. My daughter was thriving in high school, making honor roll and playing varsity soccer. My girlfriend had moved to our city and become an integral part of our family. We had found our rhythm, the three of us, and it felt right. Then everything changed again. A few weeks ago, I was out having dinner with my girlfriend when my daughter called, panicking. My ex had shown up at our house after 15 years of silence. She wasn't alone. She had brought her new boyfriend with her. When I got home, seeing her standing there in my house made my blood boil. She was crying and trying to explain herself, saying she had suffered from depression after giving birth and needed to find herself. Her boyfriend, who looked about 5 years older than me, kept nodding along as she spoke. I stood there, listening to her excuses, feeling like I was in some bizarre dream. She talked about therapy and personal growth, about realizing her mistakes and wanting to make things right. But what really got me was when she suggested sharing custody of our daughter. After 15 years of complete silence, she thought she could just walk back into our lives and play mother? I lost my temper. Years of buried anger came rushing out. I told them exactly what I thought about abandoning a baby, about disappearing without a word, about showing up years later expecting to be welcomed with open arms. I told them to leave before I called the police. I made it clear I'd be talking to my lawyer about keeping them away from us. They left, but I knew this wasn't over. My daughter was understandably curious about her mother. She's 15 now and has never known her. But I don't trust my ex. Not after what she did. I'm trying to protect my daughter while also respecting her natural curiosity about her mother. I've told her it's okay to have questions, but we need to be careful. I've seen firsthand how unreliable her mother can be, and I won't let her hurt our daughter the way she hurt me all those years ago. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat alone in the kitchen, looking at old photos. My daughter as a baby, her first steps, first day of school, all moments her mother had chosen to miss. Now she wanted back in, and I had no idea what to do. The only thing I knew for sure was that I would do whatever it took to protect my daughter. Things got worse after that first visit. My ex started calling and texting my daughter constantly. She sent message after message about how sorry she was and how much she wanted to be part of her life. Then came the gifts, expensive ones. Designer clothes, jewelry, even a new phone. I could see my daughter struggling with it all. She didn't know how to handle this sudden attention from someone who was basically a stranger to her. I told my daughter she didn't have to respond to any of it if she didn't want to. But I could see the confusion in her eyes every time a new gift arrived or her phone buzzed with another message. It's hard for a teenager to ignore someone trying so hard to get their attention, especially when that someone is their mother. Then came the day that pushed me over the edge. My ex showed up at my daughter's school during lunch break. She made a scene in front of everyone, crying and trying to talk to my daughter. The school called me immediately. By the time I got there, my daughter was in the counselor's office, upset and embarrassed. I had to practically drag my ex away from the school, while she kept yelling about how she'd do anything to be part of our lives again. That night, my ex sent me a bunch of messages threatening legal action if I didn't let her see our daughter. I'd had enough. The next morning, I called a lawyer. I needed to know what rights she had, if any, and how I could protect my daughter from this chaos. The lawyer gave me some peace of mind. He said my ex's rights were limited since she'd abandoned us for 15 years without any contact. He advised me to keep track of everything, every call, text, gift, and incident. He also suggested getting a restraining order after the school incident, saying her behavior could be considered harassment. But my ex wasn't done. She started telling my daughter stories about our past, lies about why she left. She claimed I'd been abusive, that I'd cheated on her, that I'd driven her away. None of it was true, but I could see these lies affecting my daughter. She became quiet and started spending more time alone in her room. My ex even tried to get my family on her side. She reached out to my parents and sister, trying to tell her version of events. But they weren't having any of it. My family had been there through everything. They'd seen me struggling to raise a baby alone, seen all the missed calls and ignored letters trying to find her. My mom actually told her off, calling her selfish and heartless. Then her boyfriend got involved, making everything even messier. He showed up at my workplace one day. He started off calm, but then he began making threats. He said if I didn't let my ex see our daughter, there would be consequences. I reported this to my lawyer immediately, adding it to the growing file of documentation we were keeping. I started noticing things that made me suspicious. The expensive gifts, the aggressive push for custody, the boyfriend's involvement, it all seemed off. My lawyer did some digging and found out my ex and her boyfriend were having serious money problems. They had a lot of debt, and he had a record. He'd been involved in fraud before. It started to make sense. They'd probably heard about my career success through mutual friends. I'd done well for myself over the years, working my way up to a senior position. It looked like they saw my daughter as a way to get to my money, maybe through child support or other claims. The situation was getting out of hand. My daughter was caught in the middle of it all, and I could see it taking a toll on her. She'd always been outgoing and happy, but now she was withdrawn and stressed. My girlfriend was worried too. She'd been amazing through all of this, supporting both me and my daughter, but I could tell she was concerned about how this was affecting our family. One night, my daughter and I had a long talk. She told me she was tired of all the drama. She said her mother's messages were becoming overwhelming, and the gifts made her feel uncomfortable. She didn't like how her mother was saying bad things about me, because she knew what kind of father I'd been. She'd seen me working hard all these years, never missing her events, always being there when she needed me. That conversation gave me the push I needed. The next day, I told my lawyer to file for a restraining order. We had plenty of evidence: the school incident, the workplace threats, the harassment through calls and texts. The court date was set for the following week. During the hearing, more truth came out. My ex's boyfriend had a longer criminal record than we initially thought. He'd been involved in multiple scams, usually targeting people for money. The judge looked at all the evidence: the abandonment, the recent harassment, the boyfriend's record, their financial troubles, and the suspicious timing of their sudden interest in my daughter. The court ruled in our favor. My ex was ordered to stop contacting us. The gifts had to stop, and any contact with my daughter would have to be through proper legal channels with supervision. I felt relieved, but I also felt sad. Not for my ex, but for my daughter. She deserved better than a mother who only came back when she needed something. That night, as I was cleaning up after dinner, my girlfriend came into the kitchen. She'd been quiet all day, and I could tell something was on her mind. She hugged me from behind and asked if I was okay. For the first time in weeks, I let myself break down a little. I told her how angry I was that my ex had brought all this chaos into our lives, how worried I was about my daughter, how grateful I was to have someone like her by my side. Just when I thought everything was settled, I got an unexpected call. It was Rachel, my ex's younger sister. We'd been close years ago, but lost touch after my ex left. Rachel wanted to meet and said she had important information to share. After everything that had happened, I was hesitant but agreed to meet her at a local coffee shop. What Rachel told me changed everything. She had known parts of the story but had recently learned the whole truth. She felt guilty for staying quiet and wanted to make things right. According to Rachel, my ex hadn't left because of depression or to find herself. The truth was much simpler and much worse. It turned out that my ex had been seeing one of her regular customers from the diner, a wealthy businessman. He'd promised her a better life, fancy trips, and expensive things. So when our daughter was just a few weeks old, she left with him. They traveled around the country, living off his money. But when his money started running out, she left him too. That's when she met her current boyfriend. He was the one who found out about my success through some old friends. When he learned I was doing well financially, he convinced my ex to try to get back into our lives. Their plan was to get partial custody and then demand money, child support, back payments, anything they could get. Hearing all this hit me hard. For years, I'd carried guilt about not being good enough, about not keeping our family together. Now I was learning that none of it was my fault. My ex had never wanted our family life. She just wanted an easy way out. Rachel offered to testify in court about everything she knew. With her help, we filed new papers. The court hearing was intense. My ex tried to deny everything at first, but the evidence was too strong. Rachel's testimony was the final blow. She provided dates, places, even old messages that proved everything. When the truth came out about her boyfriend's criminal past and their financial scheme, my ex broke down. Her boyfriend disappeared as soon as he realized their plan had failed. He took whatever money they had left, leaving her with nothing. She ended up having a breakdown and had to be hospitalized briefly. The court gave me full custody with no obligations to my ex. They ruled that any future contact with our daughter would need to be supervised and would only happen if my daughter wanted it. For now, my daughter has decided she wants minimal contact, maybe once a month with supervision. I agreed to support whatever she decides, as long as it's on her terms and in a safe environment. Through all of this mess, my girlfriend never left our side. She attended every court hearing, helped my daughter deal with her emotions, and kept our home life as normal as possible. One evening, as we were walking in the park, the same park where I used to take my daughter to play when she was little, I realized something important. Despite everything that had happened, we had built something good, something real. I proposed to her right there in the park. Nothing fancy, just an honest question from my heart. She said yes, and for the first time in months, I felt pure happiness. When we told my daughter, she hugged us both and said it was about time. These days, things are calmer. We're planning our wedding, something small and personal, just like us. My ex is reportedly getting help for her mental health issues and trying to stay sober. She gets her monthly supervised visits with our daughter, and while things aren't perfect, they're stable. My daughter is doing better too. She's back to her old self, focused on school and friends, planning for college. Last week, I found an old photo album while cleaning out the closet. Looking at pictures of my daughter growing up, her first steps, first day of school, soccer games, science fairs, I realized something. Life doesn't always go as planned, but sometimes the unexpected path leads you exactly where you need to be. My daughter came into the room while I was looking at the photos. She sat next to me, and we went through them together. She asked questions about when she was little, laughing at my terrible attempts at birthday cakes and holiday decorations. Then she looked at me and said, "Dad, I know it wasn't easy doing all this alone. Thank you for never giving up." Those words meant everything to me. They made all the sleepless nights, all the worry, all the hard work worth it. We've been through a lot, my daughter and I, but we've come out stronger. Now, With my fiancé in our lives, it feels like our family is finally complete. I'm not angry anymore. Not at my ex, not at life, not at anything. The past is the past. What matters is that my daughter is happy and healthy, that she knows she's loved, and that we're moving forward together. Sometimes the family you end up with isn't the one you expected, but it's exactly the one you need. We're planning to move to a new house after the wedding, a fresh start for all of us. My daughter is excited about decorating her new room, and my fiancé is already planning a garden. It feels right, building this new chapter together. Life isn't perfect, but it's real and it's ours. That's all I ever wanted anyway.